Many chronologists attempt to continue tracking time from Abraham to the Exodus by the births and deaths of Abraham's descendants. This method would only take them to the death of Joseph, and from there it jumps to the birth of Moses, leaving an undetermined amount of time when using the methods of births and deaths. Would the Bible not have an answer? It does give the answer in a unique way. Most read over the account of how the Bible answers this question, and they wonder, what does this mean? Or completely ignore this defining statement in Exodus 12, verse 40 and 41. Now the sojourn of the children of Israel who lived in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass, at the end of 430 years, at that very same day it came to pass, that the armies of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. What is God telling us by this defining statement? He does not just give us the number of years, but an exact date. On the day that the Israelites left Egypt for the promised land, it was the 15th of the first month, Nisan. Whatever happened 430 years before that would have taken place on that same day. As explained in video 5, Abraham left Haran at the age of 75. Would his leaving for the promised land be determined as the 430 years of Exodus 12, 40, and 41? The explanation is found in the article, The 430 Years of Exodus 12:40 and the 400 Years of Genesis 15:13. This material presents a more accurate understanding of the 430 years of Exodus 12:40 and the 400 years of Genesis 15:13, and the approximate number of years that Israelites were in slavery in Egypt. It is not the 400 years that most think that Israel spent in slavery in Egypt. It can be ascertained by looking at the ages of the men who lived through this period of time. God has recorded their ages at critical times in each of their lives to give us a better appreciation of the continuity and interaction of them and their history. This continuity explains how their experiences and prophecies passed on to Moses, who recorded all of them for us. The starting point is Exodus 12:40 and 41. Note, all Scripture is quoted from the New King James Version, unless otherwise noted. Now, the sojourn of the children of Israel who lived in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of 430 years, on that very same day, it came to pass that all the armies of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. Notice, Israel here represents the whole family, beginning with Abraham. Therefore, it means that the sojourn starts with Abraham and should not be taken to mean only the time that the Israelites spent in Egypt, as is shown. Galatians 3:16 and 17. Now, to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. And he does not say two seeds, as of many, but as of one, and to your seed, who is Christ. And this I say, that the law, which was 430 years later, cannot annul the covenant that was confirmed before by God in Christ, that it should make the promise of no effect. The questions which need answers are, 1. At what point in Abraham's life did the 430 years begin? And 2. And when did the 400 years begin? The following will show their relative positions in history. The 400-year prophecy is stated in Genesis 15:13. And he said to Abram, "Know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years." There are two important points to note here. This prophecy pertains to Abraham's descendants, not to him. And because he had no descendants at this time, the starting point for the 400 years occurred in the future. Then, when did this affliction begin? Abraham was 100 years old at Isaac's birth, and 75 years old when God gave him the first promise. Genesis 12:4. So Abraham departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. And Abraham was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. This would account for 25 years, so that the beginning of the 400 years would occur at another juncture in his life. That occasion is shown in Genesis 21:8. So the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the same day that Isaac was weaned. The key to the start of the affliction is found in Genesis 21:9. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, scoffing. The word scoffing in Strong's is 67:11 and is defined as a verb meaning to laugh, to make a joke, to mock. Genesis 21:9 may have the sexual, licentious overtones that is found in Exodus 32:6. They rose up early the next day, offered burnt offerings, and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink, and rose up to play. Number 67:11. Genesis 21:12 explains who would be the seed of Abraham. But God said to Abraham, "Do not let it be displeasing in your sight because of the lad, or because of your bondwoman. Whatever Sarah has said to you, listen to her voice, for in Isaac your seed shall be called." This verse puts God's stamp of approval on Isaac as Abraham's seed, by Abraham sending Hagar and Ishmael away. This is the point at which the 400-year prophecy begins. 5 years after Isaac's birth. This is when God let Abraham know that his seed is in Isaac and no other. Also, it was the scoffing of Isaac by Ishmael that initiated the affliction. 25 years plus the 5 years equals 30 years, which is the difference between the 400 years and the 430 years. It should be clear that the 400 years and the 430 years culminate at the same time in Exodus 12:40. This is confirmed in Acts 7:6. But God spoke in this way, that his descendants would dwell in a foreign land, and that they would bring them into bondage and oppress them 400 years. Remember, this prophecy says that his offspring will be afflicted 400 years. It can be seen as the starting point of affliction in Genesis 21:9. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, who she had borne to Abraham, scoffing. Now, the number of years in slavery in Egypt can be determined by beginning to count the years forward from Genesis 12:4 to determine the passage of time to the death of Joseph. This would have been the earliest point of time to start to figure the slavery of Israel. Genesis 12:4, Abraham is 75 years old. Genesis 21:1 through 7, Abraham is 100 years old at Isaac's birth. Genesis 25:26, Isaac is 60 years old at Jacob's birth. Genesis 47:9, Jacob was 130 years old when he went to Egypt. Genesis 41:46 and 47, Joseph was 30 years old when he gave the Pharaoh the meaning of his dream at the start of the 7 years of plenty. Genesis 47:9 records that Jacob was 130 years old when he came to Egypt in the 2nd year of the famine, making Joseph 30 years old plus 7 years of plenty plus 2 years of famine, or 39 years when his father came to Egypt. Joseph's birth year would be 130 minus 39, making the age of Jacob at Joseph's birth 91. Joseph is the only offspring of Jacob that has his birth and death connected to a biblical timeline. The following is a summary of time from Abraham's leaving Haran to go to the Promised Land and Jacob's arrival in Egypt. Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran, and 100 years at Isaac's birth, giving 25 years. Isaac was 60 years old at Jacob's birth. Jacob's age when he went to Egypt was 130. This shows the elapsed time from the beginning of the 430 years to Jacob's arrival in Egypt was a total of 215 years. Joseph died at 110 years. See Genesis 50:22. 110 minus 39 equals the 71 years that the Israelites lived in Egypt peacefully, not in slavery. It was during Joseph's lifetime. It took 215 years for Israel to arrive in Egypt. 215 years plus 71 years to the death of Joseph is 286 years. Beginning with the original 430 years minus the 286 years equals 144 years of slavery in Egypt. These 144 years of slavery assume that it started at Joseph's death. Based on this, the following observations can be made. The Israelites came out of slavery at the 430th year, when Moses was 80 years old. Moses died at 120 years of age. Deuteronomy 34:7. By subtracting 40 years of wandering would make Moses 80. Figuring back from the 430 years minus Moses' age of 80 at the time of the Exodus gives his birth year, which was 350 years after the original promise given to Abraham. The 350 years minus the 286 years to Joseph's death leaves 64 years, meaning Moses was born 64 years after Joseph died. This can be tied together when realizing that Moses' mother was the granddaughter of Levi. Numbers 26:59. The name of Amram's wife was Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, who was born to Levi in Egypt, and to Amram she bore Aaron, Moses, and their sister Miriam. The scriptures explain that Jochebed was the granddaughter of Levi. Exodus 6:18 says, the sons of Kohath were Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uzziel, showing that Amram, Moses' father, was a grandson of Levi through Kohath, the son of Levi. Amram married Jochebed, his father's sister. Exodus 6:20. Now Amram took for himself Jochebed, his father's sister, as wife. It clearly shows that Jochebed was the granddaughter of Levi, not his daughter. The word daughter in Numbers 26:59 is a general term, which can be rendered granddaughter. The beginning points of the two prophecies are 30 years apart. But once the 400-year prophecy begins, they run simultaneously to the concluding point of Exodus 12:40. The most time the Israelites spent in slavery in Egypt would have been 144 years. Without understanding the truth of the 430 years from Exodus 12:40-41, it is not possible to determine the year of the Exodus of Israel from Egypt, as has been shown. Abraham was 75 when he left for the Promised Land. That year being 1958 BC, or 2089 AM. Subtracting 430 years from 1958 BC equals 1528 BC, and by adding 430 years to 2089 AM gives 2519 AM, which is the year of the Exodus, which began on the 15th day of the first month of 2519 AM. The statement in Exodus 12:41, that same day, proves that it is the day that Abraham began his journey to the Promised Land. This parallel is perfect. Abraham and Israel leaving for the Promised Land on the very same day, marking the magnificence and accuracy God has placed in the Bible. Once again, this demonstrates that He is the great creator of all. The belief in the worldwide flood and the parting of the Red Sea is greatly maligned by the educated of this world. The next presentation will show how the time elements from the Passover night to the giving of the law at the mountain of God transpired, and why it was the miraculous work of God.